Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Finals tonight up in Alberta. We have got everything you need to know. Let's get to work.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Locked On NHL. Thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen of the day. I am Nick Zararis, host of Locked On Oilers. That is Hunter Hodies, host of Locked On Penguins. Before we get to today's show, it is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So, much like last week, we're doing the same exact kind of format. First segment, we're going to touch on the Oilers' perspective, what's not working for them, where they might be able to find some opportunities. Second segment, we'll touch on what is working for Florida. And then third segment, we'll go big picture, series at large, storylines, trends, that type of thing. So, Hunter, when we talk about Edmonton, game 1, game 2, very different. Game number 1, they had a lion's share of the possession, and Bobrovsky had a genuinely great performance. That was the difference in game number 1. I know the final score was 3-0, but game was closer than 3-0 because of the way it went. That was a score impacts game where Florida got out to the lead, and then Edmonton really turned it on, really put on a lot of heat, and Bob was great. Then game number 2, there wasn't a whole lot going on either side. You look at the expected goals for both teams in game number 2, very low event, not a lot going on. You go look at the shot map. The only good scoring chance the Oilers had the entire game was the McDavid breakaway in the third period that he missed. He just didn't convert. There wasn't a lot going on. And in a game like that, Florida has a real advantage. So the first question I have for you, how does Edmonton get back in this series tonight?
I think it really just comes down to being better at 5-on-5. I mean, they have not scored a single 5-on-5 goal in this series. The Panthers have done a really good job, well, especially in game 2, I feel like, of smothering the Oilers' attack. I feel like with the Oilers, you can't just rely on McDavid and Draisaitl together on the ice at the same time. You're still going to have to separate them and have them come at you in waves. If you put them together, I think it just makes it too easy for the Panthers to defend, just because they can put Barkov out there against both of them and however else they want, whether it's Forsling, Ekblad, etc. And then you're leaving your other 3 lines kind of vulnerable in that situation. So I still feel like they got to keep splitting Draisaitl and McDavid. But again, Nick, it really just comes down to them being better at 5-on-5. Their only goal in this series came from Mattias Ekholm 4-on-4. That's not good enough. And we can also say the same about their power play. This was the league's best power play during the season. It's been the league's best power play during the playoffs. The Panthers so far have done a real good job through 2 games of killing penalties. The Oilers are going to have to get at least 1 power play goal in this game if they really want to get back in this series. I also feel like they have to be a bit better defensively as well. I liked what Knoblauch did in game 2, taking out Ceci. He actually had the guts to do that just because of how awful the Nurse-Ceci pairing had been throughout the playoffs. And even when he was separating the 2, Ceci was still getting crushed in his minutes. So again, kudos to Knoblauch there, but he's still got to find a way to get some better matchups for his team at 5-on-5. Maybe if, again, you're splitting Draisaitl and McDavid, maybe it's getting McDavid away from Barkov a little bit more. So that's what I'm really keeping my eye on for tonight for the Oilers. It really just comes down to getting their high-end talent going a little bit more. McDavid, Draisaitl, and Bouchard, they are the players that got them to this series. They all have to be a bit better if they want to come back in this series, just because, and especially Draisaitl, Nick. He did not have a good game 2, was all over the ice. I think McDavid had a better game of the 3, but they still can get to a much higher gear overall. Bouchard, I don't really think played that well in game 2.
Nah, he had the turnovers that led directly to the Rodriguez goal. And I want to build off of what you're saying, because I said this on Locked On Oilers on the Thursday episode that went out before game 3. It sounds like everybody is piling on McDavid, Draisaitl, Bouchard, and that you're kind of singling guys out. But the counterpoint to that is they are here because those guys have done something extraordinary.
Yes.
Go look at the point totals to this point that those guys have. They don't have anything in the Cup final, and they still have guys over 30 points. Over 30 points with 20 games played in the Stanley Cup playoffs. That is next level production. The argument for the Oilers winning this series was always their star players going crazy. It wasn't they were going to win a rock fight. It wasn't that their depth was going to be able to mitigate whatever factors as the series went along. It was they have two of the three best players in this series. If they get hot, they can pull this off. And building off of that further, it's not just getting going at 5-on-5. It is they need to have an acceptance of what Florida wants to do, because Florida is so diligent in maintaining its structure that so much of what Edmonton likes to do just isn't there. You know, I talked about it on Locked On Oilers today. I pulled up the shot maps from game 2. The Oilers had one shot from between the circles the entire game. They had one slot scoring opportunity. Natural Stat Trick had them at 1. I think Puck IQ had them at 2 high danger chances for the entire game. You're not going to win against Bobrovsky with only that. And look, I know in game 1 they had, I want to say, 10 or 11 of those, and they still didn't convert any. You play closer to you did in game 1, you're going to have a better chance. Of course, Florida made adjustments from game 1 to game 2. They slowed the game down, a lot fewer overall chances for both teams, and that favors Florida. Florida is a team that wants low event hockey because that leans into their strengths. When they have the puck for 35, 45 seconds at a time in the offensive zone, even if they're not putting scoring chances on your net, they're wearing you down defensively. They are tiring you out. And that's ultimately the trick here. We talk about this all the time. Does rush offense translate to the postseason? And the longer you go, the more difficult it is to continue to translate that, because the further you go, the better team you're going to play and the better structure you're going to play against. And more likely than not, more talented defensemen you're going to play against. And rush offense is largely contingent on taking risks and the other team making mistakes. If the other team doesn't make mistakes, which Florida makes very few of, you're going to have a hard time creating offense off of the rush, which means we need a fundamental reevaluation of how we create offense. I keep coming back to one sequence in game 2. Late in the third period, I want to say they were right after they pulled the goalie and they got it to 6-on-4. It took them the Oilers 9 passes to get a shot on goal. That's how deep Florida's defense is. They are so compressed around Bobrovsky that you can't get a cross-seam pass, so you have to stick to the perimeter. You have to rim it around the board. And if you have to pass 8 times to get one good scoring chance, it's just going to be really difficult to find offense on any real consistent level. And that was the case in game 2.
They're very vigilant in their own zone. And that's what it really comes down to with the Panthers. They love to muck it up. They kind of remind me a little bit of a way of the 2016 Penguins with how Mike Sullivan used to run that 1-2-2 in third periods, especially when his team was up. The Panthers aren't doing exactly that, Nick, but it's something similar with how they muck it up. The Penguins used to do that quite often during the early portions of Mike Sullivan's tenure, and the other team just couldn't get anything going offensively just because of the way they were playing in the neutral zone, the way they were playing in their own zone. That's how Florida was playing once they got the lead in game 2. I mean, the Oilers didn't have a single high danger chance throughout that game at 5-on-5. They finished the game with .49 expected goals for at 5-on-5. The Panthers, if you want to do 0 to 100 percentage, they had 63% of the expected goals. The Oilers have to be better in the offensive zone. They have to get their cycle going a little bit more. And I know it's so cliche to say this, they got to make Bobrovsky look a little more human, man. I feel like they're making his job a lot easier, especially in game 2. Bob was great in game 1. I'll say that. He flat out stole that game. They threw everything, including the kitchen sink, at him. Bob was great. He had a legendary performance. In game 2, though, he didn't have to work nearly as hard. They need to do a lot more around that net front area in order to beat Bob, just because he's on another level in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And again, it sounds really cliche. They just got to get the traffic. They got to get some of their big boys in front of them to take away
the ugly
some of the shooting lanes that McDavid and Draisaitl can create.
Ugly goals are how you break through against a hot goalie.
Yes.
When a goalie is going really well, when they're locked in and you can't get anything past them, you need screens, you need deflections, you need rebounds, you need second chances, basically. You need offensive zone time that's going to get you 2, 3, 4 scoring chances per zone entry. If you're only getting one look per zone entry on Bobrovsky on Florida, you're going to die a slow death. That's what Florida did to the Rangers over the course of 6 games. They waited the Rangers out and said, okay, you can take that shot. We're fine with you taking that shot. We're going to break out and we're going to go the other way. Coming up next, Hunter and I are going to tackle the Florida Panthers perspective in this series so far. So be sure to stick around. We are getting into the heart of summer. Concerts. We got the NBA Finals, the Stanley Cup Finals. MLB is in full swing. WNBA is in full swing. And if you want to get out to an event this summer, there's no better place than with our friends over at Game Time, featuring some of the best features in the industry. Things like zone deals, where you choose a section and like Game Time choose the seats, all in pricing, where it shows the total price up front with no surprise fees at checkouts. My personal favorite, the seat view, where you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. If you're going to a concert, you don't want to be stuck behind a pole. You want to see who's there to perform. The lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the business. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals or Stanley Cup Final tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thank you to everybody listening to today's edition of Locked On NHL. Now, I'm not ready to anoint Florida. I know the national hockey media is chomping at the bit to say Dakota Joshua is going to be the new Sam Bennett, chomping at the bit to say Tyler Bertuzzi is going to be the Luosterainen of a Stanley Cup winner next year. Let's pump the brakes. We've played 2 games. 2 games. I understand how narratives work. I understand the NHL gave you guys an extra day where you have to fill content. If we can do it in a responsible manner, what is your excuse? You have resources. We are our own research departments. You have an entire group of people.
Nick, don't worry. They're going to get paid no matter what, just because they're pumping up their tires.
Exactly. It's crazy to me. Yes, Florida's playing really well. It's been 2 games. They've had home ice. Let me see what the Oilers look like when they have last change. Then we can start to have more detailed conversations. But really simply, Florida plays a style that is very conducive to playoff success, and they have the star power to make it go over the finish line. You know, we've talked a lot over the last couple of years of why can't Carolina break through? Or a couple of years ago, what was the Flames' problem under Daryl Sutter, where they had the 110-point regular season and then they lost in 5 games to Edmonton? They had the playoff style. The problem was their stars weren't as good enough. Florida has the star power and the style to make it work. If you want to do volume, and Florida is a volume team by trade, you look at the high danger, you look at the volume of shots, you look at the shooting percentage. Florida, by definition, is a volume offense. They smother you. They force you to play defense for long stretches of time. They don't play a lot of defense. They've got very mobile defensemen who are pretty good at breaking the puck out cleanly. Because of that, you add all of that up with the requisite star power and the requisite physicality, and you've got a really nice recipe here. The problem everybody has, and why I don't understand why they can't put 2 and 2 together, it works for Florida because they have Barkov, they have Tkachuk, they have Reinhart, they have Bennett, they have Verhaeghe. This doesn't work if you add one guy. This doesn't work if you add Tyler Bertuzzi to, like the Islanders. This doesn't work if you add Max Domi to the Kings. That's one person you're adding to a team. Florida has wholly adopted this mentality of effort, intensity, volume of chances, break the other team's will as the game goes along. You can't just add one guy and think that's going to work. Florida has wholly embraced this identity, and it's why they're so effective.
Yeah, and to build off that a little bit, they kind of remind me a little bit of the Hurricanes, but they have the finishing talent that I think Carolina has lacked for the last few years, I think. I mean, yeah, they did add Jake Ensel this year, and he was great in the playoffs, but you look at some of the other players Carolina has, and I do think they have some really good players on their team, obviously. I just don't think they have the right, how do I want to say it, mix, finishers, all that.
They don't have
does.
Barkov. They don't have Barkov. They don't have Tkachuk.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, they don't have Carter Verhaeghe, who's also a very clutch playoff performer. They don't have Sam Bennett, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I mean, and honestly, Tkachuk hasn't even been that good in the Stanley Cup final yet. I think he has a higher gear to get to as this series goes on. I wouldn't be surprised if he has a big game tonight for the Panthers in Game 3, just because he's been a bit quiet for the first 2 games. But yeah, their star talent is better than Carolina's. Again, they play pretty similar when you watch both teams, but Florida just has the star talent. They have the best two-way center in the league, and that puts them obviously over a team like Carolina. And again, they can finish their chances. But, with Barkov, how he's playing against McDavid, it's been really encouraging for the Panthers so far. I'm curious to see if that changes now that the Oilers have last change for games 3 and 4. Does Knobloch maybe put him out there against a different Panthers line if he can? So I'm really curious to see how that goes. But it's just the Panthers are a tough matchup for the Oilers, because the Oilers are always a team that wants to, go, 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 go. We're going to go up the ice as fast as we can, get our rush chances. But the Panthers, they slow you down so effectively that it really limits how the Oilers play. And they just need to get to their cycle a little bit more. Honestly, man, it reminds me of how the Rangers were struggling in the conference final, and how the Rangers, they were always like, let's go. But they weren't able to get their forecheck going. They weren't able to get their cycle going and work down low and, get pucks deep, obviously, and just get that going. The Oilers haven't really done it that much in these first 2 games either. I know they dominated game 1, but it didn't really lead to any goals, obviously, just because Sergei Bobrovsky was great. But if they can get their forecheck going and get that cycle in full gear, and they're able to maybe wear down this Panthers defensive squad, I feel like they'll have a shot to fully get back into the series.
And one more thing to add on to that about what's making Florida work. They also just have Bob, which, that's an underrated component here, that he hasn't really had to do a whole lot in these playoffs. I saw somebody jokingly say Bobrovsky looks like somebody who hasn't played an intense hockey game in about a week during game 1, because he had all that juice. He was making all those crazy saves.
Game 1 was the best playoff game that he played this year.
100%.
He was legitimately tested throughout. He's been great throughout the playoffs. I don't think he was that great, though, in any of the other games. He was legit awesome there.
And one more thing I wanted to add on to that. Look at where the goals are coming from Florida. Their depth is mattering in this series. Edmonton was able to survive against Dallas because their star power was able to outplay Dallas's star power. Here, the stars are playing each other pretty much to a push. Florida's had slightly less offense because game 1, if you add up the accumulation of game 1 and 2, Edmonton has had the puck a little bit more. But because you look at the score impacts, the situations, Edmonton's star players have had the puck a little bit more than Florida's, but they haven't done anything. They don't have any goals. Florida's depth is giving them offense. Florida's depth right now is the difference in this series. If Edmonton is going to win, like we said in the first segment, their star players are going to need to do something above. It's hard to, when the expectation is you need to be great, but these are great players. They are capable of this. And we are going to talk a little bit more about the series at large, some of the underlying storylines that are developing coming up next. So be sure to stick around. Locked on NHL fans, I want to take a moment and bring up one of our partners, the mobile game Ultimate Hockey GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NHL GM and managing your hockey franchise? You think you could do better than Mike Greer, the formerly departed Peter Chiarelli, or Chuck Fletcher? Now's your dream has come true, and this game is most definitely for you. Manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the season, and lead to glory. Hire the right coaches and staff, trade players or draft picks, navigate through free agency and the draft, all in a challenging and realistic game world. As a hockey fan, you know there's no offseason. GMs are constantly making moves at every point to improve their team's chances. That's why I think you're going to love the game. Ultimate Hockey GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. Locked On Network listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo Locked On NHL in the game store. Make sure to check it out. To download the game, visit hockeygm.app or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate Hockey GM, start your dynasty today. thank you to everyone who is listening to this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL. All right, right now, it feels to me the story of the series is that Edmonton Stars aren't going. And because of that, Florida's depth has made the difference so far. That does not mean that is what's going to continue to happen, but based on the conversation we were having before the show started, we both are aware of what happened over in the NBA in that game 3. It really does feel that if Edmonton doesn't win tonight, at that point, you're rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. 3-0, 99.99 not happening. Hell, 2-0 is difficult. 2-0 is something like only 8% of teams come back to win the Stanley Cup after being down 2-0. It is really difficult. It's not a must-win, Hunter, but it very well might be a can't lose.
Yeah, I don't think you can lose this game if you want to win this series. There's no option for the Oilers but to win. Just win, baby. That's how I'm going to go with that, Nick. Just win, baby. But I think with the Oilers tonight, we've been talking about it throughout the show. And yeah, I know in a way it kind of does seem unfair that we're asking for more out of Bouchard, McDavid, and Draisaitl just because of how great they've been in these playoffs. But, their level to a degree has dipped a little bit in these 2 games. And they're going to need to play their tails off if they want to come back and win either 4 in a row or 4 out of 5 against this juggernaut of the Panthers team. As we've seen throughout the playoffs, when they're not going, they're usually getting caved in game after game after game. Yeah, they've had the occasional depth goal from someone like Matthias Janmark. Someone like Connor Brown has played well in spurts. Even Corey Perry has had a couple of decent games here and there. But that's the exception, not the norm. I think if he was healthy, Evander Kane would be making, more of a difference. But it's very obvious that he has been hurt throughout these playoffs. I think it was on 32 Thoughts. Elliot Friedman was saying he was having a hard time sitting down on the bench during games. There's rumors that we'll have to see if he even plays tonight in Game 3. It sounds like he's dealing with something really serious. So
From what I heard, the sports hernia. From what I heard, he's dealing with the sports hernia.
Yeah, and you and I both know how serious of an injury that is. So, again, kudos to him for gutting it out. But if he were healthy, I think he would be making a much bigger impact for the Oilers. But they don't have that luxury right now. So it really just relies on those 3 getting to a higher level. And if you can get some depth scoring from someone else in the series, maybe someone like Ekholm, who I also think has played pretty well for the Oilers in these playoffs, if you can get some more offense from him,
you need a Ryan McLeod, a Henrique, a Nuge. You need someone down the lineup to just give you a little bit of juice. The other big storyline as we're going here is very clearly the officiating. I think everybody is in agreement. We don't like this. I think that's the one thing we can all agree on. I think nobody is happy with the standard the officials are upholding so far. I think the way in which the officials are choosing to manage the game is inherently making it unsafe, and they are encouraging the players to take things into their own hands. And that's why you get things like the knee-on-knee hit from Foegele that it's mind-boggling he didn't get us suspended for. Why the Draisaitl hit on Barkov, which there's a real argument he should have been suspended for. But the league very clearly wants it like this. They want that level of, watch the game tonight. Come see if the Panthers get their revenge for what happened to Barkov. And it's frustrating as a fan because I just want to see the best players in the world play hockey. I don't really care if Sam Bennett punches someone in the face, I want to see goals. I want to see great goaltending. The violence, yeah, sure, it's whatever for me. But at some point, we got to care about safety a little bit. If Barkov couldn't play tonight, that's a problem for the league. If you're one of the best players in the world, can't play because of a hit that happens, because the officials aren't controlling the game properly, that's bad for everybody involved. I don't understand how we exist in a world where the default from the league is figure it out. I don't get what we're doing here. Do you not want Barkov and Draisaitl and McDavid playing in this game? I imagine someone on Florida is going to attempt something stupid tonight to get a lick back for what happened to Barkov.
No, there are 3 people who very much like how these games are called.
Gary Bettman, Bill Daly,
and give me the other one, and you know it.
You want Campbell or you want the 32 owners?
Either one, honestly. I was also going to put George Peros in there. He loves this stuff. Like the Department of Player Safety absolutely loves that these games are called like this. And I keep seeing all these takes about the officiating on social media. Oh, the refs are against us. This team has gotten these calls compared to this other team.
They're just bad.
Guys, like these officials, they are terrible at their jobs. It has been like this throughout the last several seasons. There is no weird conspiracy. Oh, this team gets more calls than the other. No, like, these guys just don't know how to manage the game properly. If I see a penalty go uncalled, I just kind of just roll my eyes at this point because that's what we expect. This happens in every single Stanley Cup final because they call less penalties as the playoffs go along. There's more penalties called in the first two rounds. It goes down in the conference final, and then it goes down even further in the Stanley Cup final because they love these type of violence hits overall. They love when teams only have, I'm just throwing a number out there for you, 8, 9, 10 power play opportunities in a series over the span of 6 to 7 games because they want the whole game to be played at 5-on-5. They don't want this to turn into special teams battles, which I would say if there's a penalty committed, just call it. I don't care if a team has 5 power plays compared to 2. If that just means the other team is taking more penalties that are being called. So they're just really bad at managing games at this point. But until Bill Daly, Gary Bettman, the 32 owners, George Peros, and Colin Campbell actually want this to be changed, it's not going to be changed. So complaining about it, I think, is just useless at this point.
Yeah, and it sucks because you don't want the officials to be a storyline. You want to be talking about the hockey. And one last thing to talk about before we move on, before we get out of here, I should say, get you guys into the weekend, looking ahead to Friday. The Oilers need to win this game. It's that simple. The Oilers need to win this game. If they go down 3-0, the best they're getting is probably 6 games. The best you're probably getting is 6 games. To force a game 7 after being down 3-0, it just doesn't happen. The Oilers are more than capable of playing a winning formula against Florida. Florida is truly a great team. Edmonton is a great team. Edmonton is going to need pretty close to a kitchen sink game tonight. You get this to 2-1, then you have an opportunity to really make something happen here. But you can't start worrying about Saturday until you get through tonight. Tonight, utmost, and obviously, they know that if they lose tonight, their season is almost assuredly over. They are going to have everything tonight. They are going to need at least 3 goals tonight. You are not going to beat Florida only scoring 1 or 2. You go back and look, teams this playoff, Florida's only conceded more than 4 goals in a game, I believe 3 times. They did once against Tampa, once against the Rangers, and then once against the Bruins. You are not going to get 4 or 5 on this Panthers team.
No.
And that's the conundrum here, because Edmonton needs it a little more free-flowing to be able to make some things happen. But low-scoring games inherently favor Florida. So that means the Oilers' defense has got to be pretty close to perfect. And that's part of the reason they've had a hard time through the first 2 games. Perfection's a really high standard. And there's no fault in the other team playing better than you. But the mistakes they had in Game 2, the Bouchard turnovers, you can't have those if you're going to beat a team that might be better than you. Edmonton's going to need pretty close to a perfect game. They can do it. You saw them do it second half of Game 4 against Dallas. You saw them do it in Game 5. Hell, even in Game 6, where they only had 11 shots on goal.
Yeah.
They had Dallas had maybe 4 good looks of those 31 shots on goal that they had. They are capable of playing in a way that can beat Florida. They can win in a low event game. It's just a lot more difficult for them.
They got to leave everything out there tonight. I know that is also so cliche to say, but yeah, you go down 0-3.
Word to the water boy. Can't hold anything back.
I know. You go down 0-3 to this Panthers team, it's basically over at that point. I would be stunned if the Oilers were to come back and reverse sweep the Panthers with how good the Panthers have been in these playoffs. But I want to see the Oilers also be a bit more aggressive in this game, maybe have some more aggressive pinches from their defensemen. I think they've been kind of called back a little bit in these first couple of games. I want to see if Knobloch has a more aggressive approach from his defensemen at the point once they maybe start getting their cycle going in the offensive zone. That's something to keep an eye on. And, we really haven't had to discuss Stuart Skinner that much today. I think he's fairly good in these 2 games so far. I know he's been inconsistent at times.
He hasn't given up any stinkers. He's been fine.
No, he's been good. I think he's been totally fine. If he's able to keep playing like this, he can get them at least, a win in this series to get them back into it heading into game 4. So, I'm watching that as well. But yeah, they're going to need by far their best effort tonight. They're going to have their crowd behind them. This is be their first Stanley Cup final game in Edmonton in almost 20 years. The building's going to be rocking. And I think that's also a real thing that we have to keep in mind here with how, a home ice advantage can be pretty big even when you're down. So I'm curious to see how that factors into tonight as well. But I'm really looking forward to it, man. I'm curious to see, as we joke about at times, who is going to answer the call tonight for the Oilers?
If the Oilers are going to win, it's going to be McDavid or Draisaitl. Yeah. You're going to need a vintage McDavid or Draisaitl playoff performance tonight. You're going to need the Draisaitl that had like 28 points on one leg. That's the kind of performance you're going to need tonight if you're going to win this game, because Florida is that good. That will just about do it for today's edition of Locked On NHL. Make sure you are subscribed wherever you get your podcast. Be so kind. Throw us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify if you are watching over on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the alarm bell to get a notification whenever a new episode goes live. Leave us a comment. Do you think Edmonton can come back and make this a series? Hunter and I will talk to you guys next week if the final is still going. Enjoy the Stanley Cup Finals, everyone.